Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Disillusionment, disillusionment, and demoralization. There are millions, quite literally thousands and hundreds of thousands and hundreds of millions of example of this very self-explanatory title. The process of disillusionment and demoralizing. Every government, every corporation, every judicial, every politician, every news media is doing it to you right now. You have the so-called war in the Ukraine. My students are telling me in Ukraine that the people themselves in the Ukraine are frightened, that they think the war is imminent, even though they've seen no conflict. They hear bombs going off. They see things like a theatre show, but no soldiers, nothing really being blown up. Lots of footages of old wars that are being broadcast in Ukraine itself, but no invasion force. The savvy ones are telling me that the Ukraine government itself is actually holding the people to ransom. And genuinely, people think that within that city there is a war. They genuinely believe it, even though there is no evidence of it. What you have to comprehend as the subscribers to this channel, and my direct and indirect students, is that this level of disillusionment and demoralization is so effective, it works. That's one example. On the back of a siren, which is a mythological word to frighten people to go crazy and smash their bodies against the shores and the rocks of sailors that are misfortunate enough to pass the island where the sirens live. What you thought is mystery and mythology is being rolled out right in front of your face, even in countries like England, United States, Canada, where the vast majority of the fiction people are being disillusioned. That's what is actually going on, and being demoralized into getting you to believe that these Russians, so-called invaders, can do anything that they want, and you are powerless to do anything about it. That, of course, is a lie. That's part of the disillusionment. You know that. I'm going to give you one example that happened 20 years ago, and you will know it. In this country, several million people was gathered to object to the war in Iraq, which they knew was nothing more than a ploy to invade for economic reasons. It's an economic invasion. And the purpose of that, one of the purposes, was to register people for voting because they didn't register. And also they didn't have mortgages to register them for mortgages, loans, and a debt instrument, which was carried out by Tony Blair and the Bush family very successfully on the back of them getting you to believe that it was the Muslims that were responsible for the Twin Towers, that somehow Saddam Hussein was the terrorist. They put these things into your mind then the efficacy of that was around about 80%. In other words, 80% of the population believed it, and the other 20% knew different. You know that. Now that I look at Twin Towers, that also is an orchestrated illusion. Through the media and the manipulation of media, you folks out there not comprehending, lacking knowledge that anything that comes through the media is actually a theatre show. Full stop. For me to say that is like 25 years of in-depth study, all rolled up in one sentence. The illusion and the disillusion is what you're being confronted with. The purposes of that type of manipulation is to demoralize you. You see, ladies and gentlemen, your subconscious mind, or the higher function of part of your brain, knows it's being lied to. The objective of these parasites, which you now know as Tony Blair and Bush and the Committee of 300 and all of these parasites, is very simple. Is that they've got you believing in a lie. And that is the demoralization process. Now, on further, these several million, up to 6 million, I think it was, took to the streets of London. That was, oddly enough, put together under what is known as controlled opposition. I've got a smile on my face because I don't see why other people can't see it. I'm bewildered as to why other people can't see it. By controlled opposition, these 6 million people, sorry, the figure may be way too high. Let's call it several million people. It was over 20 years ago. Several million people. Can you imagine? Several million people took to the streets of London to say, no, we don't want to go to Iraq. By doing so, the people believe their stance on this will echo through the government. But what Tony Blair did is to tell you, by psychology, by manipulation, that your voice never counted. And this process of that disillusionment, where you actually believed by going to Trafalgar Square, by walking on the streets of London, you could actually change anything. That's not true. And when you knew that, that's when you become demoralized. So they demoralized so many people on this planet to say, we're going to do it anyway. And there's nothing you can do about it. The point I'm making is that protest was actually engineered, knowing that it was meant to fail. The reason why the all powers of attorney that you signed over in every country in the world allows them to do that, because that's what you did. You signed away your all powers of attorney, which means that you don't have any say in the matter, and your rights, your votes, your electoral ability, your legislative ability, your executive ability, your judicial ability have all been signed over to a de facto, narcissistic, psychopathic, so-called government, all on the back of your disillusionment and demoralizing you. You see, a few years back, I witnessed people, some of my students even partook in it, and I got rid of them. I just sacked them there and then. They went to Trafalgar Square on the back of this guy who does the reptilian stuff. And they did a protest and they kettled them in. And they don't know why they went there. All they know is that they have to vent their anger. Idiots. And I mean idiots from the bottom of my heart. Bloody idiots you were. Bloody idiots. In doing so, what you did is you initiated the Trafalgar Square contract. Because when you protest something, you are protesting something that exists. Whereas it doesn't exist, so they got you to protest and thereby you contracted by verbal, visual agreement that they have something and you wish to protest it. You ignited the contract of Trafalgar, where so many of the embassies of this country all look down upon that Trafalgar Square. It's called a square because that's a contract. What I'm saying to you is that your ignorance will get you in more trouble than you can actually get yourself into consciously. At some point, you're going to have to learn to switch off the television, radio station, stop reading the newspapers. You're going to have to switch off the politicians. You're going to have to write to the BBC just one-line sentence, shut up, your theatre show, you're under the penalty of perjury, put your autograph thumbprint, send it to every single politician. That will squash it. It will cause them to defecate in their pants because their power is non-existent, except to manipulate you to get you to protest, and now you've brought that contract to life. You understand what I'm saying to you? So imagine those several million people innocently go in central London 20 years ago to make their voice heard, believing nobody can ignore the voice of 1 million people, and they still go to war. And a few years later, it was all just a big mistake, sorry about that. And of course, the Iraqi people, on the back of your ignorance, are now being sold debt pledges called mortgages. They never had debt before, now they have debt. They never registered to vote because they don't want to vote. It's a corporate instrument. They are electoral people. On the back of your goddamn ignorance, you bought in mortgages, debt, voting instruments for the Iraqi people, including death by medication, and a whole heap of other things. That's all on the back of your ignorance. Whereas what you should have done is sat back and asked yourself, what's exactly going on? Here's this pathological psychopath who's the leader of a Labour Party, which is a corporate instrument, getting you to believe anything that they want. You subscribers, this 92 or 93,000 subscribers on this, you're being tasked to share this with the world. Because if you buy into the Ukraine war, you've just brought yourself into another disillusionment and demoralization. Have you ever seen a man and a woman that has been totally demoralized? They're spiritless. That's what they did with the Iraq war. That's what the banks did with the banking industry. That's what they did with debt instruments called mortgages. This ongoing situation that mankind sees itself in and keeps perpetuating is all done on the back of ignorant people. Ignorant people, ladies and gentlemen, are the most deadliest people on this planet. You can educate them, but if they veto it, it's that. So you need to make your stance by sharing this video, downloading it and uploading it, and also do the same thing when I trained the Canadians for free to squash the powers of attorney and broke the code on it. That is now echoing throughout the world. Did you know, ladies and gentlemen, that Putin was once a member of the Olympians? He broke out of them. And to celebrate that, last week sometime, he commissioned an architecture of wood resembling the Tower of Babel, Tower of Babylon. You know that famous tower where their plural God turns around and says, let us go forth and confuse them, so they may never construct anything to touch the gods, as it were. You see, many Christians believe that's the correct thing to do. God to confuse your tongue to speak in babble, so you'll never construct anything, so you may war yourself away to death. If you believe these sort of things, which is what you're being asked to do in modern day terms as well as mythological terms, that's the world you're going to live in. And I'm afraid, from the way that the world is rolled out with the vaccines and etc., you're not going to make that journey. A man or woman has to be in their correct frame of mind. Okay? He commissioned the Tower of Babel and burnt it down, 21 or 23 meters high. Okay? To say that he has the Olympians, the Committee of 300, are finished. You understand what I'm saying? Of course you do. I don't have magical solutions, ladies and gentlemen, for educating the world at large, because some of them may be well far gone. They may be well beyond the point of reach or rationality or logic or reason. Their emotions are so out of control, they are purely reactionary. Can I ask one of my students that came forth to narrate Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars to also narrate, if they can, through the permission of Dr. Null, Death by Medication? I think it's pronounced iatrogenics or something. Do that so I can share it and upload it, so you understand what the deadly effects of the pharmaceutical is. Yeah, so just look it up, Death by Medication. I think it's free on PDF. You might need to get permission from Dr. Now to narrate it. Of course, you need to credit him with it. And whoever sends me the recording, I'll upload one of them onto YouTube, and the rest of the recordings I'll send out through all to everybody that's on my email list, so people can see how many different ways they can die on this planet. Not just through the media, through the lies, but by direct effects of taking pills and etc. Okay? Thank you very much for listening to me. Bye-bye.